Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. Last week we checked out music that wasn't rock or metal. Today we're going to transition into some rock, specifically alternative rock. Now this is kind of a large umbrella term for a lot of sounds, so I'm not sure how cohesive this week is going to be sonically, but I'm sure we're going to get a lot of interesting works. And we're kicking it off with some Radiohead, so interesting seems to be par for the course so far. Also, this one's called Weird Fishes / Arpeggi. Not Arpeggio, just Arpeggi. Gotta look that one up when this is done and see what's going on with that. Let's dive into this track though, find out what Radiohead is bringing to the table today. Very interesting phrasing here. So the guitars are focusing on groups of 3, but it is in 4/4 if you follow along with what the drums are doing, and that clash there is what creates the interesting phrasing that I picked up on when the track started.
Turn
almost weightlessness and ethereal sound overall to kick the song off, but entering into something a bit more physical here while still retaining the noisiness. Kicking in a bit of tension here. Dude, this band. I wish I could say I get them. Because, you know, Radiohead, they're a pretty big deal, right? They got lots of fans. But they're one of those groups that I feel like I want to like, but maybe it's just the tracks y'all give me. There's been a few of them. Don't get me wrong. There's been some stuff I've really enjoyed. I thought Nude was really well done. Witches, although I might be getting that confused with Storm Corrosion. No, that's something totally different. That's the Porcupine Tree guy, Steven Wilson, I think. Anyways, I don't know. I'm getting some of this stuff mixed up. Maybe Radiohead is not. Nah, Radiohead's a band that I've kind of bounced off of. Anyways, this track, I don't know, dude. I feel like I want to like it. It has a cool atmosphere to it, but it ends up kind of not doing anything. The verse is a lot of glittering, shimmering of the guitars, a pretty straightforward drum beat that keeps the backbeat and presents this every other beat accentuation, giving us a bit of a 2 and 4 attack on this, and gives us the core rhythm of the track that the 3 pulse in the guitars, it's a bit jarring against, and that creates the schism in the track where if you listen to the guitars, it's kind of difficult to follow along with the phrasing, especially since the guitarist changes chords at different intervals too. Sometimes they'll go the entire, was it like a 2-bar phrase on 1 chord, or split it down the middle into 2 chords, but sometimes there's also transition chords, and I couldn't really find a pattern to that, where on beat 3 we'll enter a new chord that's held into beat 4 that helps us move to the new chord at beat 1 of the next bar. But like I said, I can't really find any pattern to when we use these transition chords and when we don't. And so it became kind of difficult to follow along with what it was doing based solely on the guitar. I was catching 15-beat phrases, I was catching 18-beat phrases, I was catching 16-beat phrases. Like, it just wasn't adding up. It was difficult to follow. It wasn't until the drums came in, I was like, oh, dude, this is just 4/4. The guitars are just purposefully odd in their rhythmic elements and their accentuation patterns and their general phrasing. And this creates what I think is the core of the song here. There is a clashing between what the guitars are doing and what the drums are doing. The vocals come in and choose the drum side. They're rather palatable rhythmically and make sense in the phrasing area. The guitars are rather odd within that. But this is only for the first half of the track, and the back half we kind of ditch this concept entirely and focus on something else, which we'll get to in a moment. Because what the guitars are doing here at the beginning is kind of interesting. I mean, it's in the name of the track. These aren't straightforward arpeggios where we rise up and fall down chords playing only the root, third, fifth, and octave, which is also the root. But those notes are the only ones, I think, from a majority of the guitar work that I heard. They're the only notes used in the guitar melodies. Like I said, though, it isn't just a simple rising and falling. There's movement, but we're only focusing on 3 notes total per chord. It creates something that feels very open. Getting across an entire chord in just 3 notes feels vast. Feels like there's a lot of growth, a lot of quick movement. It's very different from a melody that just kind of hovers around a home note. So we do have this momentum, and it typically feels freeing. There's typically a positive element to arpeggiation, although depending on the chords you're using, that can be injected with other feelings as well. If you use a chord that is kind of melancholic, the openness of the melancholy can kind of create something that feels pensive. There's ways to use arpeggios to create something that feels a bit more longing, or what's the word I want? Like nostalgic. So arpeggiation adds flavor to what a chord is already doing emotionally. And here we tend to have more brighter sounds. Like I said, the guitars are kind of twinkling already, but it feels generally optimistic. The guitars are once again clashing though. We listen to the vocal melody and it kind of hovers around a spot, and the vocal delivery is a bit lower energy and a bit more dreary. We have this vastness versus a closed offness. We have another schism in the track, another clash, and once again it's the guitars clashing with something else. This makes up a majority of the track, though at the back part of this first half we're adding more and more of these guitar parts, where it started as just one guitar on one side, eventually became 2 guitars, became 3, and I think even 4 guitars, all doing these arpeggiated movements at different times too, I think. Sometimes it was simply that they're not starting on the same beat, but they're both emphasizing downbeats. Other times it was that they're starting on an offbeat. We kind of have this bouncing idea where one of the guitars will accent the downbeat and the other guitar will accent the beat between beats, the and of the beat. And it starts to sound very cluttered, very claustrophobic. It's noisy. A cacophony of consonants. As all of this begins to get to a head, though, it's sort of wiped away. We move into something that is more physical. All of these instruments that were light and floating and very, vast and moving kind of brings us down into something grounded, rooted, impactful. It feels heavy here. I don't really think I noticed it at the time how light, feather-like the beginning of the song is. It really only is in contrast with these heavier, more physical sounds, the distortion really ramping up on the guitars here, that I noticed how freeing everything was prior to this point. Now, I didn't really catch much here. There's some riffage going on with the distorted guitar. The drums are keeping a beat. I was kind of lost. This section didn't really tell me anything harmonically. It was more of the sonic elements that grabbed me. That being weight, physicality, presence. That's what hit me here. And then it just sort of, it's gone. We were in there for like a minute. We returned back to some twinkling, and then the song just ends. There's no nice way to wrap it up, no clean finale. The harmonic passage is technically resolved, but it doesn't feel like an end either. We got to the end of a phrase, but not the end of the song. And I think all of this is where it starts to lose me. I'd love to hear y'all's interpretation of this, what you get out of this track, what you enjoy in this track. I liked the first half. I thought that was a nice atmosphere to be within, and I liked the clashing elements everywhere. Transitioning that into something more physical, I like the contrast of that, but it kind of comes out of nowhere. And like I mentioned, I didn't get too much out of that section in isolation. It just felt like a contrast. And for as long as we were in the beginning, probably in this only a third of the time before we transitioned back to something softer. There's always a chance, though, that the lyrics are going to provide some insight, so let's check them out, see what Radiohead is singing about here. Is this track about personal relationships? Trying to build something that's worthwhile and finding that that tends to fail. It uses a metaphor of living at the bottom of the ocean. It says, in the deepest ocean, the bottom of the sea, your eyes, they turn me. Verse 2 says, I'd be crazy not to follow where your eyes your eyes lead. But they turn me into phantoms, and I follow to the edge of the earth, and I fall. Yeah, everybody leaves if they get the chance, and this is my chance. This right here talks about somebody who becomes fascinated by someone else. Says that your eyes turn me, and where they look, I follow, because I'd be crazy not to. But eventually it leads him off a cliff. This is where the title comes in. It says, I get eaten by the worms and weird fishes. But then the music, the eaten by the worms and weird fishes, I think is the heavy section of the track. But then it flips back to something closer to the beginning, the optimism and brightness of that. It says, yeah, I hit the bottom and escape. Is this about a cycle? Following people only to find out they don't have your best interests in mind, but never allowing that to consume your optimism, never allowing it to make you distrust people. The next person might not do this to me. So he escapes from the bottom, heads back up to where he was, and, well, as the music states, presumably gets led astray again. At least that's how I read it, especially when you listen to the music. There is a floatiness and a brightness, a twinkling to the beginning that interestingly juxtapose the vocal delivery. It may be that the vocals are a bit weary of this whole cycle, but they're not giving up. And when they hit the bottom and they begin to be eaten by the worms, this is the heaviness, the weight of it. This is darkness being brought into the track. There's no more weightlessness. This is weight. This is a problem. But it doesn't consume him. He finds a way out of it and brings the twinkling sounds back. Returns back to the optimism. Still, you can hear it draining the vocalist a bit. Our narrator, they're not chipper like the music is. I believe that their hope may be dwindling, but they still try. And I think that's a pretty cool message to send in a track, especially when nihilism and misanthropy is so common in metal and seemingly more common in just online discourse these days. It's nice to see something a bit more positive, even if this came from, what year was this? Oh, 2007. So, yeah, maybe a little bit more of an optimistic time. Not by much, though. So I think it still is a bit of a shining light, even when it came out. These are my thoughts then on Radiohead's Weird Fish's Arpeggi. What did you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this? Please put all of that as well as anything else you'd like to add into the description box, into the comment section below. Above that is a description box. In there is a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.